This is the Radical Rant Podcast. Radical Rant Podcast for August 6th, 2019. Adam, aka CSRadical, here with you guys. Welcome to the 11th episode of the show, and it turns out that's how long it took for us to have a pissed off Adam podcast today. So there is not going to be a whole lot in terms of variety and content. There are two things I'm basically going to spend this entire show talking about. That being that video games are to blame for everything now, including death somehow, and a situation that I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about on the podcast, and it's gone on long enough now that I think I need to get it off my chest, and that is the situation between Colin Moriarty, Chris Ray-Gun, and the Sacred Symbols podcast with PAX, and that will be the latter half because we need to get to the main story here. But first off, I just want to say at the very beginning here, it's not like there was nothing else to talk about this week. There was a few things here and there. Like, I'm really stoked that, for example, Guilty Gear, a new Guilty Gear game got announced at EVO. There's a release date for the Grand Blue Fantasy fighting game that Arc System Work is also working on. There are stories out there that happened the last 7 days that I could talk about from a gaming perspective. I absolutely could. This just ain't going to be one of those weeks. Every once in a while, there will be times where we will have episodes like this, where it doesn't matter how many stories there are overall. There are just going to be some that take the entirety of the show. And I mean, if I really wanted to make this a 2-hour podcast, hell, knowing my luck, this might somehow only be 30 minutes anyway. But I don't want to make this into a 2-hour podcast because two topics, for example, take up an hour and a half, and then suddenly go out and just do like 5 quick stories that take up another half an hour. I don't want to be doing that stuff. This podcast today is going to be 2 topics. I just said what they were, and you are going to get the first real sense of what I am like in radical rant mode for the first time in quite some time on this channel. And what I mean by that is not necessarily angry in terms of my voice being raised, but you will definitely understand the anger that comes through the course of this podcast today. You will definitely see the anger. You will hear the anger. You will definitely understand that this is not a happy podcast today. I don't want this to be every week. And certainly, even though the title is what it is of the podcast, it's not intended for that matter to be specifically angry. It's not meant to be nothing but rants and ravings and volatile subjects and things of that nature. The Radical Rant Podcast is just a name that's floated around for a long time, and it's always worked with me. I love the way it sounds. It's stuck with me since I really started doing things on YouTube. So that part hasn't changed, and the name is always going to stick. But there are definitely going to be shows like this where you are going to get the full Radical Rant experience, and this is definitely going to be it, because the 2 topics this week have driven me mad like a motherfucker. I said on Twitter that I tried really hard to let this stuff simmer, and that maybe I'd be talking about it a little bit calmer. And I am calmer than what I used to be when I was younger doing Radical Rants, where I was a lot more angry and yelling. This is not going to be the same thing, or at least it's not intended to be as we are getting into this. But I tried to let it simmer. And as much as it kept simmering and simmering, the pot was still boiling and it wasn't stopped. It just didn't stop. So this is not going to be a fun episode, unless your idea of fun is a lot of anger, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of cursing for sure, and subjects that aren't exactly fun to talk about, are they? So with that being said, I apologize in advance for some of the anger that's going to come out here. So anyways, I don't pretend to know why people go out there and commit mass shootings. I don't. I don't know why someone gets into such a state of mind that they think it's okay to go and do what they did in El Paso and in Dayton. Not to mention that here in Canada, there were, from what I understand, 13 separate shootings over the long weekend that we had here because a civic holiday was on Monday for us. So we had a 3-day weekend this weekend. I don't pretend to know why these things happen. I have my assumptions. I'm figuring mental illness is part of it. I'm figuring just some people are just inclined to be more violent. Well, the one thing that I will certainly say that is not part of it is video games. I don't think it takes much of a stretch of the imagination to understand why video games aren't a significant reason as to why people would commit such heinous acts. In the same vein that I have said before, that we understand the difference between fantasy and reality. Thus, that should mean, in theory, and in practice it does, that just because we play something in a video game does not mean it translates into real life. I don't play Call of Duty every single day of my life and suddenly get the idea that I need to go out there and kill people. I have played various either games that indulge in waifu culture, like say a Fire Emblem, Mass Effect, like games that your goal by the end of it is to have a sexual partner. I don't play these games where I know that if I select a certain option, say a certain thing, she's going to get into my pants, or I'm going to get into her pants. I don't think that when I go into real life that all I have to do is say a couple of nice things to the person and give them something, and all of a sudden they got to suck me off. So, when the shootings in El Paso and Dayton came out, I, like many people, went, oh great, here it is again. Now, instead of the simple thing of just going out there and being, man, we've really got to look into what is causing this. We need to start talking about mental health. We need to talk about better gun regulation. And then here's the thing too. Actually, no, I'll get into the gun control stuff in a minute. We're not here. We need to talk about mental health. We need to talk about, gun legislation and things of that nature. And most importantly, we need to have a moment to let the people who are affected by these tragedies to at least, fucking settle down for just a moment before we start really going into the things of why. And instead, we went back. Somebody opened a time portal to the 2000s, to the Columbine area with Jack Thompson, and Fox News going back and forth talking about Mass Effect, the original Mass Effect, being a full sex simulator that little kids were playing. We went back into those days because now the President of the United States and a bunch of Republicans, not to mention Fox News itself, have decided to go out and play the video games are responsible for this. The scapegoat card that we are so familiar with. And the only reaction that I had when I first saw, I don't think Trump was the first thing that came out. I think it was like guys like Dan Patrick and Kevin McCarthy going out there and saying that video games were to blame. The reaction that I had was, oh great, here comes these quacks again. And then Donald motherfucking piece of shit idiot Trump came out and said the exact same fucking thing. Not that we need to look into things like mental health. Not so that we need to look into maybe keeping guns out of the hands of people that cannot be trusted to hold them. No, we talked about video games. Because 30 plus years of studies that have mostly shown no correlation between violence in video games and violence in real life. Even some that presidents have put out. Even with that information, we still assume that must be the problem, right? We assume that someone playing Call of Duty, someone playing Fortnite, that is what causes heinous acts like this. Violent video games. As someone who has been playing video games since he was 5 years old, As someone who has been playing shooting games since, what was the first one like I really paid attention to? Probably GoldenEye. I know that there were games like Doom and Wolfenstein. That wasn't my era, and I didn't have a computer that was playing those games, and I didn't pay attention to it. GoldenEye is really the first one that I paid real attention to in terms of like a first-person shooter kind of genre. I've been playing... I'm 31 years old, and I've been playing since I was 5. So I've been playing video games for fucking, 26 years? And if you really want to say like more violent games, probably 20. 20 years. You know what my criminal record says? Nothing. I might have a couple of speeding tickets. But in terms of violence, nothing. Do you know what my entire history throughout school has been? One case of me getting in trouble for being violent. You know why I got in trouble? Because I defended a friend of mine who was getting beat up. And this is not a fucking joke, by the way. I defended a friend who was getting beaten up by another bully. And you know what I did? I hit him with a do-a-tang. You know those fucking like flimsy paper fucking booklets? I got in trouble because I hit him with that. He also, by the way, punched me in the fucking gut. That hurt a lot more than the fucking do-a-tang did. I got a yellow slip in my school, which at that point would mean that if I got one more of those, I would be in position to possibly be suspended or even expelled from school for hitting somebody with a do-a-tang. That is the closest you will ever get to a guy who has been playing violent games for more than 20 years in his life and will continue to play violent games throughout his entire life because I'm not getting away from gaming. Gaming will always be something in my life and not a goddamn person in this world is going to tell me otherwise. I will continue to be with this till the day I fucking die. And for 20 plus years now, the most violent thing you can come up with me is that I hit somebody who was bullying somebody with a flimsy paper book. I have never intentionally thrown a punch at somebody. I have never gotten into a fight in my entire life. And it's not even because I'm a wimp. I know I can hit and I know I can kick, but I don't fight because I don't see the reason to it. I have, in my life, held, not real guns, I've held BB guns and fired them and went, nah, this isn't for me. I can go and play laser tag and have fun with that. I can go and shoot archery practice with, it's like archery dodgeball. It's like those really like foamy tips and stuff. I can do things like that. But in terms of a real gun, I may in my life at some point hold an actual pistol or even a machine or even like an assault rifle and shoot one. If I ever go to the States and do something like that, it's possible. I'm not going to ever say no. But I don't think in my entire life I will ever become a gun nut. And this is somebody who has been playing Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Battlefield, Mass Effect, various games throughout the last 20 years that I've been playing these kinds of games for. And here I am telling you I have no interest in guns. Here I am telling you that I don't have any intention of ever getting into a fight with somebody. Unless I have to defend my life, I ain't getting into a fight. There's no reason to. What's the point of that? And for people to go out there and say that video games must be the sole responsible party for why these things happen is fucking asinine. Explain to me why this culture has created so much ire from the media, from the political party, especially the Republican Party, from conservatives. And believe me, as somebody who is basically right in the middle when it comes to political motivation, it drives me crazy to see how both sides use video games as scapegoats for things. And as much as I hate social justice culture, I hate this idea that criminal conduct is caused by games a hell of a lot more than, Kotaku randomly one day saying, oh, people who play the specific game, they must think that women are lesser. I would rather deal with those articles every day than have to watch the President of the United fucking States of America tell me that it's because of the things that I love more than anything in this world. That's the reason why more than 29 people, I think it's 29, I don't know what the number is last I checked, but 29 people lost their lives collectively in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio. He's telling me that's something that has kept me from killing myself, that has kept me from ever wanting to engage in violent activity with other people, that's the reason violence happens? Are you fucking nuts? When so many studies, by the way, have come out, and like I said earlier, some were even authorized by the president to get done because they wanted to see this shit. And they have come out almost every single time saying there is zero correlation. And I say almost every time because there are some that do say that there's a little bit here and there. Like there was a study that said they put a bunch of kids playing Minecraft and they had a set of them with guns, a set of them with swords, and a set of them with no weapons. And that when they finished having these kids play the game and they put them into a playroom that had things like swords and guns and stuff, the ones who were using the guns in Minecraft were more likely to grab the guns in the playroom. Because that really means something, right? Because that's like the be-all end-all. There are sources, or studies I should say, that do say that there is correlation. And generally speaking, those results are either very small, they're cherry-picked, or they're clearly from an organization that has a specific interest in mind. Most of them being religious. I don't believe for a second that video gaming can create such reprehensible human beings. The only caveat I can or the only compromise I guess I can give is that video games might be something that enhances someone who is already gone. I'm not ever going to say that it's going to enhance somebody that has no interest in violence. It is definitely going to enhance somebody that is already predispositioned to do something stupid. The people that do these things usually have two things in common: depression and mental illness. You can say both are the same, but realistically, depression, I think you can kind of take out of the mental illness category because I think there's varying levels. But we're talking somebody that cannot see right from wrong, that cannot see reality from fantasy. I'm aware that the guy who was it the El Paso one? Whichever guy that they were talking about had the manifesto that talked about he was gonna live his super soldier fantasy from Call of Duty. I understand what that means. That there's somebody that was probably playing Call of Duty and said, man, I want to do this with somebody so bad. But you're missing the fucking point. How many people play Call of Duty? And how many people commit these crimes? Where are your numbers saying that the video games must be causing this? Where are your numbers? Where are your metrics here? Where's your studies? Where do you got? What do you have that can possibly show that people playing Call of Duty must be automatically inclined to just suddenly go out there and shoot people in real life? When tens of millions of people have been playing those games, and what's the number of people that have committed mass murders? Fucking less than 100. Like, this year, I think it's what, like 10, 12? And how many of them were big in games? Was the guy who shot up Mandalay Bay, was he a gamer? I don't think so. And I don't remember ever seeing that in a report. So clearly it's not every mass shooter. So do we maybe ask the question that if it's only something that seems to appear in some of these cases, maybe it's not necessarily the major factor. Maybe it's a small piece of enhancement. I'm willing to make that compromise that somebody who is already mentally ill and should not be having access to firearms can maybe be predispositioned further to doing something like this because he plays Call of Duty. I'm willing to compromise that. But to say that it's the reason, it's the sole proprietary reason for why this happened, no. 1,000 times no. 1,000,000 times no. Infinite times no. It's not true. And for the president, I can get by with a couple of quack Republican senators doing this stuff because there's always a couple idiots. Government is always full of morons. But the President of the United States, who has the access to all this information, should know better. Which tells me one thing. He knew, and I know he knows. Here's the thing. It dodges the real conversation by doing this. We all know. We're not stupid. We have seen this happen so many times now that we've become aware of it. It's like secondhand to us now. Every time Fox or any Republican, because it's usually them, goes out and talks about violent video games being the reason for stuff, you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to deflect the conversation. The conversation being that we need to concentrate on things that, quite frankly, to a politician is so much harder. Talking about mental illness, dealing with drugs, dealing with gun legislation. Those things are harder to talk about because it takes fucking work in the case of talking about mental illness, or in the case of gun legislation, takes actually talking about something that their constituents and a good chunk of their voting population would hate them for. And again, I understand that. You don't want to do the work because you're lazy, and you don't want to have to piss off your voting base because you know that you will take this gun off of my cold dead hands. Which again, and you know what, let's talk about the gun thing too. I am fully understanding that you cannot just take away all the guns. I am fully willing to understand and believe that that is probably the right thing. You can't just take them all away. Because we know that if you take them away from all the legal owners, that all this does is leave a massive, massive amount of firearms available to the criminal market. And we know that that's the case because we know that I think, like, what was it? Like, I remember, this is a while ago. Off the top of my head, I could have sworn that I saw a stat that said there are more guns in the U.S. than people, and about 25% of all those guns are illegal. And it might be more, it might be less. I'm not sure. I'm kind of guessing because I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around a quarter. So think about that for a sec. So let's say there's 500 million guns in the country. And let's just say that a quarter of them are illegals. That's 125 million guns still. So you take away 375 million, yeah, that looks pretty good on paper, doesn't it? But now all the people that have them are people that are going to commit crimes. They're people that are going to do negative things. They are not there just to collect them. They are not there just to have fun with them in terms of taking them to a shooting range and just shooting them for fun. They're not there for hunting. They're not there for anything like that. They're there to commit violent and criminal acts. Over 125 million weapons. And again, I'm just pulling these numbers out of my ass. So please don't act like, I'm trying to give you facts that aren't there. I'm fully telling you that these are just numbers I'm throwing out of my ass right now. But let's just say 25% of all guns in the U.S. are illegal. That's a lot. And you can't get rid of those because they're illegal, which means you don't know where they fucking are. So, I understand that you can't just suddenly say, okay, everyone, take your guns, throw them in the trash. Or take them to us, we'll throw them out for you. I know you can't do that. So what can we do? Well, for example, I don't understand why we need to have all these extra attachments for guns, like these extended mags kind of deals. The things that are giving people 100 bullets in the chamber. Why? For citizen consumption? Why? Why do we need that? That's a military thing there. That's absolutely no reason for this in terms of just some random Joe Schmo having that. So there's that. Attachments like that stuff. Because there was the bump stock thing a while ago that people were talking about where there's basically zero recoil, which makes it even further dangerous for somebody who wants to commit these acts because you certainly got a less chance of missing. I've also been of the kind that's like, what do we need assault rifles for? I don't get that. I mean, if there's a government uprising, there's always that argument. And look, I get it. I really get it. But fuck, do you need an M4? Do you need an AK-47? I don't think you do. I don't mind you having a pistol. I don't mind you having a hunting rifle. If you need something to protect yourself, go ahead. I don't give a shit. But there are certain guns out there that I look at and be like, why does any random person need that? And then the most important thing is, how the hell are these getting in the hands of people that are mentally ill? I understand, and this is the thing. I've watched several videos because I did my research on this way back when. I know that for a lot of places, especially the most well-known gun stores, the actual steps it takes to get a gun there is not as simple as people think it is. It's not like you just walk into your random gun shop and just you buy a gun and that's it. Nothing to it? No, it's not that easy. There are background checks, and as far as I remember, I think they say they run them through either the CIA or the FBI. I think it's CIA. But I know it's not simple. But still, how is that possible that there's so many people that with mental illness getting a hold of these things? Is it that it's being sold, from person to person, which I think should be illegal? I don't think you should be able to buy I don't think a citizen should be able to buy a gun off another citizen. I think any sale of a firearm should be dealt with proper legislation, with proper regulations to it. That's my opinion. I don't know how this happens. The only thing I can figure is that, well, maybe a lot of people are buying these guns and then later someone else is either getting a hold of them that shouldn't have. Like we see with the younger kids. I think the kid that shot up Sandy Hook, it was the same thing. Like, they were all his parents' guns. Or, the guy's perfectly fine when he buys the gun, and then over time, he isn't. Which is why I don't understand why, for something as dangerous as a firearm, we don't treat them with the same licensing as we do with vehicles. I have to get my driver's license renewed. Someone who buys a gun seemingly doesn't have to? Why is that? Both are capable of killing people. Both are capable of killing lots of people. But I drive around all the time in a car and can go without killing anybody. If I fire a gun where anybody is, somebody's getting hurt. There's no avoiding that. So what's the difference here? And the difference is that there is no difference. In the end, this is a case of the Republican Party, of Fox News, of gun-toting supporters that just don't want to have the conversations that they might have to compromise a little bit on. I understand what the Second Amendment says. I also understand that the amendments can be rewritten or at least revised at any point. I'm never going to ever tell you need to take away the Second Amendment. I will never tell anyone to say you got to take all the guns away from people. There's no reason for me to say that. But I think that we need to actually start and talk about the real reasons why these things happen, instead of scapegoating things that have nothing to do with it. I have known so many people in my life, all who play video games, and not one of them, I don't know a single goddamn person that has gone to jail for violent crimes of any sort. And I know people that are close to me in terms of I can see them face to face every day. I know people that are all the way in the fucking UK, in the US, from playing online. None of them have ever gone to jail. So I'm having a hard time believing that video games must be part of the problem. And by the way, is it not hilarious that they're claiming that video games must be responsible because they're getting so popular now and everybody's playing them? When you take a look at every other country in the fucking world, you look at Japan, you look at the UK, you look at Canada, you look at various countries around the world who have high percentages of people who play games. And you look at the number of mass murders, not even gun kills, mass murders. I said on Twitter, for the last, 10 years? Let me pull up the damn tweet. Let's just make it easier. Let's make it real fun. Because there is a tweet that I made that just perfectly encapsulates the stupidity of what so many people that are anti-video games have been doing. And it's just a nightmare that anyone would think about this kind of thing. And it doesn't make any sense to me that it's like that. So here's what I said. We're still getting over the tragedy with KyoAni, and that's the Kyoto Animation arson. We're still getting over that tragedy in a country that is the most prolific for being a video game-centric culture. They have had 9 massacres since the turn of the millennium. The US, there's a Wikipedia entry for every year from 2013. And all of them, by the way, and this is outside the tweet, all of them, as I looked, have more than 7 every year. The last 19 years, Japan has had 9 massacres listed. The US, on average now, has more per year. Video games, my fucking ass. That's one rant. That's one. 31 minutes into this show, we are one rant done. I could go on longer, but I think I've made my points. The second has to do with Colin Moriarty, Chris Raygun, collectively the Sacred Symbols podcast, and what has gone on with PAX West. So for those out of the loop, PAX West is a convention that goes down in Seattle and is considered the flagship convention of the Penny Arcade Expo. There are several of them. They have a forum where you can apply for panels. And just throwing himself out there for once, because Sacred Symbols podcast has a large following. It's not small. In fact, it's one of the bigger video game-centric podcasts out there. They signed up. They applied. Didn't expect anything to happen because, as I'll get to later, people have not treated Colin and Chris very well for certain reasons. But PAX accepted the panel. Gave them a date. Gave them a time. Gave them a place. Told them their badges would be coming. Start planning your travel. Book a hotel. And advertise to everybody that you're going to be there. And this is implicitly what they said in their email to them. They told them straight up, advertise you're going to be there because we want people to come. No problem. Pretty straightforward stuff. You want to get more people there because you make more money. Done. No problem. So they do that. For a couple of podcasts, they've mentioned it. Then all of a sudden, Colin gets an email. A follow-up email saying, we have removed your panel. We have canceled it. No reason is given. They don't even say, hey, we'll refund all your stuff because you're not going now. No, nothing. They just said you canceled your panel. No reason given. Now, before I get any further, I'm going to make 2 caveats here. I'm going to be very clear and very upfront with 2 things. 1, I am a follower and fan of both Colin Moriarty and Chris Raygun, both individually with Colin's Last Stand and Chris Raygun in terms of his YouTube channel. And I am also a follower of the Sacred Symbols podcast. I kept trying to say something else there. Jesus. I am a follower of them. This is why this comes to my attention, although based on the channels that I use to get my gaming news from, I wouldn't have avoided it regardless. It did come up on N4G, where I would have seen it because it was the top piece of news. I would have been like, what the fuck's this? So I would have read into it. But I knew of it as soon as I could possibly know because I follow the 2 guys. The second thing I need to be upfront about is this, because I know that people are going to listen to this and who are on the other side of the debate that I will be on and will think I'm only doing it because it's Colin and because it's Chris. So let me make this very clear. If this happened, the same thing, literally exact same timeline, exact same order. If this happened to Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, Brianna Wu, or anybody on the social justice or the left side or whatever side you want to call yourself at this debate, because I don't know, I'm not really intentionally siding anywhere. But for example, any person that, if you are somebody who's going to disagree with me in this point of the rant, any person that you are a big fan of, and the same thing happened to them that happened to Colin and Chris, if I don't actually talk about it, it's because I'm not aware of it. So if I'm not aware of it, please message me, throw a comment on a video, hit me on Twitter at CSRadical, and tell me, and I will cover it. I will talk about it, because I think that this sort of thing to happen to anybody for the exact same kind of reasons that this all happened to Colin and Chris are just as bad. I would never want somebody to have their panel removed for no reason. Or in the case of, I'm going to guess here in terms of the reasons as to why they actually lost it. But let me make that very clear. I am a fan of these two, but I would not wish this to happen on anybody, even those that I am completely against, like an Anita Sarkeesian. So, why did this happen? I really tried to find it. I really did. I spent a lot of time going through tweets, Googling, trying to find real good traces of what Colin and Chris have done that is so reprehensible that would cause them to lose this panel. Because make no mistake, if this was a time problem, if this was any issue that could have been settled because something like a mistake at the convention, anything that would have been considered a mistake would have been told in the email, would have been said by now, because PAX has still not given an official reason as to why. At the time I'm recording this, I know of no reason PAX has ever given for why this has happened. Which leads me to believe that it's not something positive. That it's not like an honest error or a mistake or anything of that sort. This is vitriol. This is hatred. This is in response to something that's happened, and they were against the guy and realized it and finally shut him down. This is essentially an attempt to deplatform. And as we've seen by Colin's Patreon and by Chris's Patreon and by his store in terms of his merch, it doesn't really affect them. In fact, you've given them more attention. So you've already failed in that aspect. But we have to assume at this point that it's not something good. The reason can't be good why it happened. So like I said, I tried to find stuff. I really tried to find legit reasons why Colin, specifically Colin, because that's who the ire is really set towards. I've tried to find why. And I can come up with two things. The first is a tweet that he made over 2 years ago. It almost could be 3 now. And most people who remember Colin know this. On International Women's Day, there was the hashtag a day without women. Or a day without a woman, something like that. And as a joke, Colin put out a tweet that said, peace and quiet. Hashtag a day without a woman. That's a joke. It's a joke. It doesn't take a genius to see that that's a joke. I know that to some people that might be offensive to them, but it's a joke. You might think it's a bad joke, but it's a joke. Because if the guy really wanted to not have women around him, he wouldn't be in a relationship. If he didn't want women around, he'd be a fucking mass murderer probably. Instead, he's a games journalist. That's what he is. He's not anything crazy. The outrage that happened from that tweet when that first happened was a nightmare. And this is the one piece that I have found online that today is being talked about as why he got taken out. I've not seen things of like new tweets that he said. I have not seen about stories that he's written. I've not seen about comments that he's made on the podcast. And I've listened to every Sacred Symbols episode at this point. I've not heard anything that could be considered remotely as quote-unquote bad as that tweet would have been. So the question then comes, if that tweet is the reason, and this is a hypothetical here, if the tweet, peace and quiet, hashtag a day without women, is the reason for why he doesn't get a panel at a PAX convention. Now, full disclosure, if PAX doesn't want him there, they don't have to let him there. I fully understand that. But they accepted him already. And not only that, told him to promote. So they knowingly said yes to him and knowingly went to go further with that. So tell me if that tweet can cause a turnaround like that. Who gets to talk at a convention? Seriously, who gets to? Because how many of us have never made a joke making fun of a man or a woman? How many of us have never made a joke about women being loud and obnoxious at times? Women being bitches, women being slutty. Or in the opposite, men being stupid, men being fat, men being lazy, men being violent, men being criminal. How many of us haven't made a joke like that ever in our life? Going even further, how many of us haven't made a joke about certain races, about certain sexualities? How many of us? Never? How many? I'm willing to bet it's not many. I'm willing to bet it's a very small number. Especially in the games industry, willing to bet it's a very small number. Certainly smaller than enough people that you'd be able to have at a PAX. At something that size, I don't think you have enough people that can do that. Because if we're going to put this in an equality brush, if we're going to paint the equality brush all over this, guys, you have to understand that it is impossible that anyone would be able to speak because there is always something that's offending somebody. Any joke, just on the basis of being a joke, is going to offend somebody. Even the most harmless joke will probably offend one person. So with that being said, who gets to speak then? Who? Because all the people that seem to be commenting on how that joke is reprehensible are probably people that have made similar jokes, have probably been people that have made worse jokes. I've seen people like Sarah Silverman go out and comment on certain things you can't joke about, and yet the woman's dressed up as fucking Hitler. But it's a joke, so it shouldn't matter. I'm of the point that says, who gives a shit? It's a joke. Everybody should be allowed to. In the case of PAX, I think anybody should be allowed to go up on stage. PAX is well within the right to say no. But the problem is PAX already said yes. You fucked up, PAX. Somebody fucked up, so deal with it. You should have let them go. Because now that they've done this, it's out of their hands now. It's now a story that's going to be... They are no longer the story anymore. Nobody's going to be going to the convention talking about what's going on at PAX now. The majority of people are going to be talking about what's not there. But again, explain to me why that joke, why that tweet, why that joke tweet is so bad that you could get somebody removed from a panel. Unless that panel was about never making jokes about women, I don't know what you have. I don't know what evidence you have on the guy. Because that's not sexist. And I've had people try to explain to me how that's a sexist joke. I'm like, well, if that's sexist, then any joke that's ever been made by a woman about a man should automatically be painted with the same brush. But I don't give a shit about these kind of jokes because to me, they're all fair game. That's the thing about equality, guys, is if you want equality, then you have to either let everything pass or let nothing pass. You don't get to play both. You don't get to say, I'm there for equality, but you can't make a joke about a woman. That's not equality. That's not equality. And I'd love to hear somebody explain to me why that's not equality. But the other thing that I think is part of why Colin is being taken to task and being removed from this panel is because, quite frankly, he's conservative. And again, PAX is well within their rights to just say no to the guy. But they should have done that the first time. And here's the thing, too. I know what that conservative word means to people on the side of the debate that is opposite to mine. To them, conservative means Nazi. To them, conservative means fascist. To them, conservative means racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, transphobe, all these fucking words that they pull out every time somebody disagrees with them. And all those people have no idea what Colin is as a conservative. Colin does not support Donald Trump. Colin does not support anti-abortion. Colin does not support delegalizing gay marriage. Colin's for pro-choice. Colin's for gay marriage. Colin doesn't have a problem with most of these key issues that people seem to associate with the far right. But because he disagrees on various things, that conservative label turns into a Nazi label. And I don't understand why we let people say this stuff with zero proof, with zero evidence, and honestly not knowing what the fuck they're talking about. But because we still play the side of political siding, we're supposed to be on one side of the debate, and whatever that side is, we have to adhere to everything that side says we're supposed to be. This is the infuriating thing about being somebody in the center, is that I have to listen to both sides tell me what I'm supposed to think because I sat on a certain side of the fence on this specific issue. When I sit on the left on something, apparently that's supposed to mean I'm also against all forms of joking, of any sort of of any sort of off-color joke and insult. All these things I'm supposed to automatically be against without any nuance, without any context, without anything. But then if I'm on the right side of an issue, I'm supposed to automatically just think everybody's a libtard and an SJW cuck piece of shit. And I'm supposed to be for, anti-immigration and, religious rights and all that. I'm like, what the fuck? As a guy in the center, and as an individual, my views will never be the same to yours completely, to a T. If we spend enough time together, whoever is listening to this, one-on-one, we spend enough time together, we will eventually find one thing we differentiate on. No one person is the same. So for them to go out and label Colin because he says he's conservative, which, by the way, from what I've gotten from him, and Colin, if you ever listen to this, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I've listened to with Colin, it sounds a lot like most of his conservative views have to do with the economic structure to things. I think it has less to do with things like abortion, immigration, and those kind of things, and so much more towards how we use our fucking dollars, how the government operates in terms of budgeting and debt control and all these kind of things in terms of their spending. I think that's where Colin's majority of his conservative views come from. And again, if I'm wrong, let me know. But that's the sense that I've gotten from him. But for them to take that side of Colin and suddenly just attribute that to a guy like Richard Spencer is insane and shows that we are in an age where people are not willing to accept the fact that there are just people different to them. And I don't understand why so much hatred can come for a guy that, as someone who has listened to him for years now, I have never heard such a negative part of him. I've never seen a negative bone to his body. I've seen people talk about how he's just the worst thing on the fucking internet, how he's a Nazi, how he's a bigot, how he's a racist. I've seen all these things. That's what I saw through all the scrolling on Twitter. That's the thing I saw from a lot of Googling, is just baseless accusations and insults. I don't understand how so much hate can be drawn on a guy that, from what I've listened to, and this is not kind of like, look, you can, and like I said, I'm a follower of the guys, but if you think this is biased, like, I don't fucking know what to tell you. But as someone who has flip-flopped on so many different people over the course of my time listening to things on YouTube and reading articles and going through websites and watching movies and music and all this stuff, I've flip-flopped on so many goddamn people. I've never listened to Colin and went, oh my God, what a fucking asshole. The closest I can get to is him just being like, we don't need to touch loot boxes. That's where I'm like, yeah, okay, no. That's about it. I've never heard him say something, whether I've watched him on Joe Rogan, when I watched him on Dave Rubin, whether I've listened to the Sacred Symbols podcast, whether I've seen Colin's Last Stand, Fireside Chats, and all these things. Never once have I heard him say anything that made me go, what a fucking dick. And as I try to look for evidence, as I try to look for all that stuff, Like I said, I only found 2 things. The one comment, the one tweet about peace and quiet, a day without women, or just the fact that he's conservative. That's it. That's all I can find. And if there's more to it, somebody fucking send it to me, please. I'd love to see it. And believe me, if there's something that I see and I go, holy shit, what a fucking dick, the next episode, I'll fucking say it. Or whenever I get this, I'll fucking say it. I'll say, what a deplorable piece of shit. But I haven't found it. And I looked hard. I mean, if you want me to be the guy that's the fucking no-lifer that spends a day going through 5+ years of his fucking Twitter account, I ain't doing that. But if I go around for about a half hour or so on Google and Twitter trying to find people that have evidence to support their claims of him being a piece of shit, and the most I can see are the 2 things that I just told you earlier. If that's all you got, what do you actually have? Nothing. That's what you fucking have. Nothing. And like I said, this isn't even because it's Colin and Chris. This is anything. If you're, and I'm talking to a social justice warrior or a leftist, look at me, which is stupid because I'm center-left. So technically I'm a leftist. But anyone who is disagreeing with me right now as they listen to this, take any of your favorite people on the internet that could do a panel at PAX. Any of them. I don't care how big or small they are. I don't care what gender they are, what sexuality they are, what race they are. I don't give a flying fuck what they are. Just tell me that person's name and then tell me the exact same thing happens to them that would happen to Colin and Chris, and I will be right standing there next to you saying that's bullshit. Because the most important part of this story is not that PAC said no to them. Is that PAC said no to them after saying yes and telling them to advertise. So they just made money off of them doing nothing. They lied. They used them. And that is shady fucking shit. And I don't care how bad this person is. That is shady fucking bullshit. Tell me that I'm wrong. That if somebody, anybody, got accepted to do a panel, told to advertise it, and made that convention money because they advertised their appearance, that's not shady shit when they suddenly turn around and be like, you know what, no, you're not getting a panel now. No reason, though. Which tells me that, again, like a lot of people on the internet do, you're not acting in good faith. You don't care that something shady happened here. All you care about is that somebody that you have been told, by the way, you didn't come to this decision yourself, you've been told that he is a dick. That he's a Nazi, that he's a bigot, that he's a racist, that he's a sexist, that he's a misogynist, that he's a fascist, whatever fucking insult they're throwing out today because that's the new buzzword. Whatever you've been told about him, that's why you don't give a shit. You don't actually know anything about the damn guy. You've just been told he's an asshole, and you go, well, you told me X and Y about this guy, so you know what? That must be true. So because of that, you're just automatically going to be like, fuck that guy. No, you know what? Fuck you. Because you're the reason why we are in the social climate that we are in today. People like you are the reason that we can't agree on anything anymore. And people like you are the reason that we are becoming a much more volatile society than we have been in a long time. Because you can't accept that there are people that are different than you. You can't accept that there are people that disagree with you. And you just can't accept the fact that you can't be bothered to even barely look into somebody and find out for yourself. All you see are the baseless accusations. All you see are buzzwords. And all you see is more hate. And instead of either shutting up and staying out of business that you don't know a thing about, or actually turning around and being like, dude, what are we fighting this guy for? Instead, you join the mob. Because it's easier and fun to you. You like piling on people. Kotaku released a story about this and spent the first chunk of it saying why we should hate these guys. Why we should hate Colin and Chris. They finally put an addendum into it later in the night that at least had Colin's comments. But they're way at the bottom of the article, so most people probably don't even make it that far. But I still said the same thing that I would want to say in every single one of these cases. And I will pull up that tweet in just a moment as soon as I find it. Where the hell is it now? I can't seem to find it right now. But the gist of what I said, and I said this to Stephen Totilo when he mentioned that they did put an addendum to the article, and I said thank you for doing that, because what's so important is that at least now, whether or not it changes somebody's mind, at least Colin's side of the story is there, and people can make an educated decision. When we have articles like what Kotaku writes on a consistent basis, by the way, what Polygon writes on a consistent basis, and other right-leaning publications also do, like the Daily Wire, they always write from a one-sided perspective. They want you to think towards a certain answer. That is the wrong way to write a story. By the end of the story, you shouldn't come out being like, oh, that must be what I'm supposed to think. By the time that story is done, you should have come to your own conclusion. And the only conclusion you can come to from that initial copy of the story that Kotaku put out is that these guys are dicks and probably deserved it. That's what the article basically tells you. And the comments section pretty much reflects that. Because you can tell. Because there are either people there that say, fuck that guy, or people being like, but why? There's only the two sides. We're fucked. As a society, if this is how we're going to act every single time something happens. I don't understand why so much hatred can be dished out to people that most of these people don't even fucking know. Colin, as somebody that I have known for a long time, not personally, obviously, but as somebody that I've followed for a long time, I've never had a bad thing to say about the guy. I might be able to disagree with some of the things that he says, but it's never like, fuck that guy. Chris Reagan is somebody that fucking helped me through a lot of this early days of social justice shit when things were really starting to get out of hand. These two guys earned a lot of my respect, and they did it over time. When stories like this come out, it reaffirms why I have respect for them and why I have very little respect, if any at all, for people on the other side of the debate. Because I've seen so many people come out and say, fuck him, he deserved it, and then when asked why, they don't come up with anything. And for PACs, by the way, to still not have a reason as to why. I don't care if they give them any money back. I don't care if they refund fan tickets or not at this point. I just want to know why. Have some balls and be honest. Tell us why. Because as far as I'm concerned, I know why. Somebody said yes. You didn't figure out who it was right away. And the second you did, you cut him. Or you accepted him. He advertised it. And people heard about it and bitched to you about it. So you had to cut him. Because apparently you take certain people's opinions over everybody else's. This is what you should have done. If somebody bitched to you, this is what you should have said. You should have come out and said, look, we accepted this guy. We've asked him to advertise. Our hands are tied at this point. We made this decision to accept his panel. And it would not be right for us to just suddenly say no to him. If you don't like this guy, you don't have to go to his panel. There are plenty of other things we have available to you. Give examples of the more progressive things that you have at the convention as an option for people to go to. But say you have other options. This guy will not be going around and interrupting your day. This is the one panel we have for him doing. And that's it. You don't have to suddenly be like, oh, well, you got to cave into this. No. You just had to do nothing. If you had done nothing, very little would have come of this. I don't think Kotaku writes an article about Colin being at PAX. I don't think any article gets written about him from any major outlet. I think a bunch of small-time YouTubers and bloggers who just have a hard on hating the guy might say something. But I don't think Kotaku, Polygon, or any of those places are going to write anything about him. Because the Sacred Symbols podcast is not a political podcast. It's a PlayStation podcast. That's all it is. And that's all they would have done. They would have talked about PlayStation. They would have talked about the gaming industry. They wouldn't have talked about SJWs. They wouldn't have talked about fucking feminism. They wouldn't have talked about that tweet that he did all these years ago about women. They would have talked about video games. And if you have a problem with people talking about video games, then I don't know what the fuck to tell you at this point. There's nothing wrong with it. And anybody who disagrees with me, like, please, try to convince me otherwise. And I'm being honest here. I am open to change my mind here. It's just, I looked, I tried. I gave you guys a try when I researched to just find anything I could to go after this guy. And I couldn't find it. Because that one tweet is not worth that. It's the weight of that tweet is not enough to justify removing a panel. And just the political side that he stands on is not enough. Because if it is, good fucking Lord. If that's all it takes, why do we even exist? Why do we even exist as a human race? If that is what it takes. I'm disappointed. I'm so disappointed in the last 7 days of what I've had to see. I've seen both sides of the political debate, the political spectrum, make an ass of themselves. I've seen the right completely piss me off. By the way, they pissed me off more than than this thing with Colin. I'm way more pissed off with the right now because of what they did, what they said. They made an ass of themselves by attacking the thing that we all love because of something that we know is horrifying and needs to be addressed. But video games weren't the problem. And then the left, because again, make no mistake, the people that wanted Colin out, the people that are like, fuck him, they are all on the left. They are all on the far left. They are all in the Kool-Aid drinking part of the left here. The part that I don't understand why they can't see that I'm still on their side on so much, but they can't see past the fact that I disagree once or twice. Those people also need to feel absolutely fucking embarrassed that they have the gall to go out and attack this guy for nothing. Nothing. And please, if you're disagreeing with me on anything that I said, hit me up. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear it. Because I'm always happy to learn, and I'm always happy to talk more, which is more to say than the people that are on the opposite sides of these areas. The gun-toting right would never want to hear what I have to say about this, and the SJW left would never want to hear what I have to say about Colin. But I dare you. Tell me what I'm doing wrong here. Tell me where I'm wrong. And I'm happy to answer. So with that being said, guys, hope you enjoyed this first real Radical Rant podcast in terms of the emphasis being on rant. I'm a little calmer now because I've got a few things off my chest here. I'm not going to be that much calmer, but at least I've said it. This is bullshit, man. I thought I could go a little bit longer in this podcast. Like, I don't know if I should feel surprised or disappointed that it took 11 episodes for this. It's almost funny. Like, I'm not sure whether to think, man, I can't believe it took 11 episodes, or man, I can't believe I only lasted 11 episodes. Like, here I am thinking that, man, it's probably a miracle that it actually almost went 3 months without a bunch of these issues like this happening. But at the same time, it's like, really, it only took 3 months? That's the state that we're in, is that I can't decide. I can't decide whether we're that far gone or if that we shouldn't be that far gone. I can't tell anymore. That's how ridiculous everything is today. Fuck. All right. I need to get out of here before I suddenly turn this into a 2-hour podcast when I go on a million different tangents here. So, thanks for watching, guys. You can like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Don't forget to share this to all your friends. And like I said, if you got comments about this stuff, and please, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, I want you to talk because I need to listen. I need to hear more because I don't want to be in an echo chamber. I don't want to be in an age where I'm only hearing the little bits that I want to hear. I want to hear stuff that's different. I had a fight with an old friend of mine from college about the Colin stuff. And I left it at least learning more. It didn't change my opinion, but I learned more from people that are on a different side of the argument than I am. I'm always happy to hear arguments. But you also need to understand that you're going to have to hear some that you don't. And this is what I see with a lot of people, is that they just don't want to hear the other side. But anyways, like I said, I don't want to start on another tangent here. So thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully next week when I see you, it'll be a little happier. So I'll see you next time.